After the fireworks yesterday afternoon, I fear what I'm going to be talking about is going to seem rather anodyne, a bit kind of fluffy, but I'm hoping you'll get some kind of some nice positive images out of what I'm going to say. And I'm also going to slightly expand the coverage of, but I think it's been hinted at already, and I was quite reassured, because I thought my presentation was going to be rather kind of off to tangent, but when I saw the Dockmaster video just then, I was quite reassured, because some of the things I'm going to be showing you kind of link to some of the things that they've been doing in Stavanger. So I spent a long time agonising about a title, and the title there was a bit of a departure from the title in the brochure, but what's in a name anyway? My main interest for a long time is how can we improve public spaces, and by that I mean how can we improve the quality of life, the appreciation of public space. For me, public space is incredibly important. It's where democracy happens. And one of the things I have concluded is that we can improve public space by use of good public art, good street art, good graffiti. What do I mean by those topics? Graffiti, we were told yesterday, started in Philadelphia in the 1970s. Of course, that's just not true at all. Graffiti has been with us for as long as human beings have roamed the earth. This is a little example that I spotted fairly recently, and you can see 1936 carved on that cornerstone of the building. And of course, graffiti is merely making marks on surfaces. It's got no legal kind of definition at all. It's literally making marks on surfaces. I suppose the big question that has been coming up implicitly in most of the presentations and discussions so far is what's good graffiti and what's bad graffiti, and crucially, absolutely crucially, who decides what's good and what's bad. I don't have an absolute answer to this, but clearly there needs to be a broadening out of who decides what's good and what's bad, from, as the barrister yesterday mentioned, a kind of small clique of white middle class males who I think he mentioned mostly lived in Pinner. And there are ways, and again it was hinted at earlier on, that we can maybe broaden out who decides about what is good and what is bad street art. So this is going to be a very subjective presentation of what I think is good and what I think is not so good. I'm going to start off with a couple of images of what I think is not so good, and then from then on I'll try and concentrate on what I think is good. Generally speaking, I don't think many people would say that was a good enhancement of the urban environment. I'm not sure that it's that problematic. It was a pretty tatty space anyway. I don't know whether it's made it any worse or not, but I rather doubt that it's made it any better. This I find very problematic. I don't think that's helpful at all, particularly as it's obliterating directions to a very interesting community initiative, which is a kind of community theatre and alternative performance space. So I think most people would agree that that is a bad use of graffiti. But is it all pointless vandalism? I thought that was a rather clever little observation on electricity junction box I spotted. And I want to follow that up with a remark that Ben made on the video yesterday about, well, how about just leaving things like this, and over time they will somehow improve. And I've actually got, I think, an illustration of what that might actually look like, which is a wall in Paris, whereas the kind of, as the tagging and street art has accumulated over time, it's actually got more and more interesting. And in my view, that's quite an interesting wall now, whereas maybe when that started, as Ben was saying, it might have looked a bit kind of bleak and uninteresting, but it's definitely accumulated into a rather interesting, I would argue, colourful and visual improvement to that particular space. This piece of graffiti or street art went up in Bristol a few years ago, overnight, produced by a certain well-known Bristolian street artist, whose name I don't think I need to mention. The Bristol City Council have what they call a clean and green team, which is basically the graffiti removal squad. I think they should be called the clean and grey team, because the paint they use for buffing out graffiti and murals is or has been inevitably grey. The immediate response of the council when this went up overnight was to call in the clean and grey team. But to their credit, and I suppose realising the celebrity of the particular artist who did this, they decided to check what the public thought before. The City Council in Bristol has a website where they sort of a consultation website, so they kind of posted a question on the website, and the overwhelming response from the general public was that that image should stay, despite the fact that it was technically illegal and potentially could be argued to be criminal damage or contravening planning regulations. I think there is gradually, I think I can be fairly optimistic that, as with that example and some other examples we've heard over yesterday and earlier this morning, things are changing in a generally positive direction, although the Sydney example of removing the official mural walls I thought was a very depressing retrograde step. One of the kind of interesting things I spotted which symbolised to me that maybe there is a shift in general public opinion and particularly opinions of the authorities in the establishment is when I saw this in Montpellier in the south of France, a local police station. But I just want to, I'm going to move on shortly to some case studies of what I think are really brilliant examples of whatever you want to call it, graffiti, street art, or mural work, public art. I don't want to kind of dwell on this too much, but as we were looking at yesterday afternoon in particular, a lot of graffiti artists are prosecuted under the criminal damage legislation. I was asked a couple of years ago to be an expert witness at a case where somebody who's actually giving you a presentation tomorrow from Bristol put up a small mural and he was charged with criminal damage. And I thought, because I'm been asked in as an expert witness, I'd better go and check what the criminal damage legislation actually says. And it's fairly tedious stuff. But basically, it's about destruction or devaluation of property. Interestingly, I couldn't find any reference to permission. So this idea, and again it came up this morning and yesterday, that the offence is doing something without the owner's permission doesn't seem to actually come up in the legislation. And the other big question is, what happens if you actually increase the value of property by doing something to it that might be called graffiti or street art? There's another example from the same well-known Bristol artist who did this on a wall, and the owner, obviously clearly without the knowledge or permission of the owner, but this was a private side of a private house in Bristol, and you can see the owners actually framed it and put, you can't really see from that image, but there's actually a perspex cover over the top of it. So clearly, as in the owner's view, that had increased the value of that particular wall. I should point out that I failed dismally to allow this person who you'll be hearing from tomorrow, Chris, shortly, to not be convicted of criminal damage. I argued that what he did could have increased the value and certainly didn't damage the property that he put the stencil on, but the magistrate was having nothing of it. I was quite outraged actually by the magistrate's view, because I thought I'd argued, and several other people argued also, that this wasn't actually criminal damage that had occurred. But it's amazing how much subjectivity judges and magistrates can bring into their decisions. We could have appealed, but it's going to be far too expensive to appeal. Anyway, I want to finally move on to some examples of, I think, where generally what I'm going to show you from now on has been done with permission. And I think it would be very difficult to argue, for anybody to argue that any of these interventions I'm going to show you could actually devalue the property, even if they've been done without permission. So I'm just going to finish off with some kind of inspirational imagery from several different locations. And one of the really inspiring places that I came across as a result of my interest in improving public spaces in Brussels, in Belgium. And there's been, I don't know whether it was a kind of organised programme, but quite a long time ago, lots of gable ends in central Brussels had these beautiful murals put up on them. And this is another lovely example from Brussels. So I'm just going to go through with some images. I'm not going to say very much, but towards the end I'm going to make a suggestion that some people might think a bit kind of off the wall about how this could maybe develop, this kind of development of beauty through murals could actually be developed into something which is almost like an architectural intervention. This is one I saw years ago in Vauxhall, as you can see. Does anybody know if this is still there? I took this photo years ago. Sorry?
There are some leftovers.
Some leftovers, but it's probably got slightly degraded. But a beautiful mural. Probably maybe 20 years ago I took that image, so if there's still some remnants, that's quite interesting. And along the same kind of lines, an amazing, absolutely massive image I saw in Zaragoza. I don't know whether this was done with permission or not, but clearly I don't think anybody could argue that something like that would have devalued or been a negative impact on that particular edge of public space. One of the most progressive towns in France, where I'm now mostly based, is Montpellier. And I don't know whether they've had an official policy on street art or whether it's just happened, but there's a massive amount of inspiring street art, murals, whatever you'd like to call it, graffiti, in Montpellier. From the more the more kind of, I don't know how to define it, but the kind of street art, a lot of what we've been talking about over the last day and a half, this kind of imagery, I think generally done with aerosols. This kind of imagery, again, I'm pretty sure that's aerosol work. But also in Montpellier, these amazing Tronc d'Oeil murals. When you first see that, you think, well, that's just the end of a building. Why am I showing this as an example of street art? But nearly all of that is done with paint. There's only perhaps, I think these two windows here, and there's a little window up there that actually isn't paint on the end of that gable end. And another lovely example from Montpellier. Again, it's probably slightly easier to see which is paint on a gable end and which is an actual articulated building, but absolutely glorious piece of work there. But let's come closer to home. Come closer to home with my final case study, which amazingly is a little rather dreary town in Cornwall called Cullington. Has anybody visited Cullington? I'd got wind of this some years ago, and eventually earlier this year I managed to go there myself. It's just sort of northwest of Plymouth, and some years ago they had what they called the Cullington Mural Project, and they got some funding, and they started putting up murals on gable ends. Well, that's okay. That's not bad for starters, but it just kind of mushroomed from there on. And this is the local public toilets in Cullington. This is quite a fresh mural, just done this year, I believe. It's kind of obviously in memorial of the First World War. And again, or rather like this one, on the local police station, a mural as well. And it gets better. I think that's absolutely magnificent myself. I'd be surprised if anybody could actually dispute that wasn't enhancing the urban environment. And probably the finest of them all. This one. So those are all from a fairly dreary little town in the southwest of England. If they can do it there, it seems to me you could do it almost anywhere. Just a couple of final thoughts about developments that seem to me rather interesting from my urban design point of view, is the kind of move away just from paint to other media and what that might imply for the future prospects for the interaction between street art and the built environment. I like the use of paper pasted on surfaces, an interesting development. And let's move into 3 dimensions. I don't know whether this was done officially or not, but again, it's a nice kind of articulation of that small space. And when you first look at that, you think, oh, that's paint on the building, but in fact, that's all done in ceramic. And that's in Perpignan in southwest France. And to finish off, my final image is, I don't know whether you've come across this guy, and he certainly wouldn't he'd certainly describe himself as an artist, but he wouldn't describe himself as a street artist, I don't think. But in my view, he's one of the greatest street artists, and that's Friedenreich Hundertwasser, who's sadly no longer with us. And this is one of the buildings he's modified in Vienna, which you can go and visit. And what he's done, he's taken very dreary Viennese apartment blocks and completely transformed the facades of them using paint, but also ceramics and other articulations. It's rather interesting. Probably the architect who originally designed that building, a rather flat-fronted, miserable building, would say that that was vandalism to his facade. But I think, again, most of us would agree that that is a beautiful enhancement to that space. But again, it comes down to this subjectivity of who decides, and also, equally importantly, how a decision is made about what is an enhancement to the built environment and what is a degradation of the built environment. So I haven't got any answers, but with that thought, I'll leave you. Maybe some more answers will emerge over the rest of the day. Thank you.